The purpose of this recording is not only for the IAS aspirants, but it is for every Indian citizen who is not aware of his or her constitution, that is the Indian Constitution. Most of us don't really read the Constitution, maybe because we find that the Constitution is only for the intellects, the wise men of the country, or probably the lawmakers or lawyers and all those who have related to law. But no, the Constitution, the aim of the Constitution and its writing is for the citizen. It is for the law. This is the law of citizen. This is the general law of citizen. Every citizen should be aware of his or her Constitution, irrespective of educational background or his professional work. Let me start with the lecture, the Constitution. What is Constitution? Have you ever given it a thought? What exactly is it? Let me tell you. Constitution is the basic law of land. It is also called the supreme law of land. It consists of rules, regulations related to the creation of political, legal and other related institutions. Even their power, their functions, and in general the whole governance of the country. The whole government, the governance of the country is based on the Constitution. And in short, the Constitution is the supreme law of land. Any constitution can be classified in various forms. For example, it can be a written constitution or it can be an unwritten constitution. Like for ours, Indian Constitution, it is a written constitution, and British Constitution, it is an example of unwritten constitution. British Constitution is based on customs, traditions, parliamentary acts, judicial decisions. So it has evolved over the years, the ages, depending on all these factors, which is parliamentary acts, judicial decision, customs, etc. Whereas if you look at the Indian Constitution, it has been written and it is an enacted one. Most of the constitutions in the world are written and enacted. On the basis of division of powers between the center and state, we can again classify the constitutions as federal or unitary. When we talk about the federal constitution, it means that the state has its own power, whereas the center only shares a base, or we can say the important decision, the important powers. Let me give you an example for better understanding. A federal constitution is the US Constitution. The US Constitution, you must have heard the federal government, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. What is federal? Federal means that they have their own structure of the state, and most of the powers are exercised by their own legislators, and center intervenes only when it comes to national security and other relations. Otherwise all the decisions are taken by the state. Whereas the other form would be the unitary form of constitution, which is where the most of the power is vested in the union, and the state are the mere delegates of the union. So the example would be British Constitution. You must be wondering that what kind of constitution is ours, if unitary is British and federal is US Constitution. But you might have something in your mind that our constitution is kind of a mixed constitution, where we have both the features of federal and unitary. And if you're thinking such then you're right. Our constitution is a Kasi federal constitution. Kasi, Q-U-A-S-I, Kasi federal constitution. It shares both the features of unitary and federal. Another form of classification will be on the basis of amendment. On the basis of amendment, there are two types of constitution: a flexible constitution and a rigid constitution. The US Constitution is an example of a rigid constitution, where any amendment is made in the constitution. It is very difficult to amend any part, article of the US Constitution. Whereas the example of a flexible constitution would be the Indian Constitution. We have a provision of Article 368 under which on specific provisions, we can amend a constitution as required, as and when required. And for country like ours with such diverse cultures and features, I think a flexible constitution was a must. And so our constitution makers were very smart and wise to define a constitution, to write a constitution in such a way that it won't come up with problems, or it won't fail. The structure of the constitution will never fail. And it is true, after all, we have survived more than 60 years post independence, and it's a country with so many different religions, different cultures. It's a perfect culmination of all religion, cultures, and still yet we are secular, we are socialist, we are sovereign, and we are independent. The next part is that there are three main organs of each and every state, which is legislature, executive, and judiciary. Before coming to this three parts, let me ask you one question. What is a state? Have you ever given it a thought? Is the state Rajasthan a real state? We call them states, but is it a state? Is it a real form of state? Is Uttar Pradesh a real form of state? My answer would be no. We call them states because they constitute the major three elements, but not the fourth one. The four elements to call anything a state is that one, it should have a territory. Yes sir, Rajasthan has its territory. It should have its population. Yes sir, Rajasthan has its population. And the third, it should have its government. Yes sir, Rajasthan has its government. But the fourth and the most important element, most vital element, is that it should be sovereign. Is Rajasthan sovereign? No sir, Rajasthan is not sovereign. Rajasthan is a part of the unity of different states, which is in total called India. So we can call India a state because India is a sovereign country, but we cannot call Rajasthan a state, a true form of state. Now coming to the organs, legislature. Legislature means the lawmaking body. Example, the parliament, the state legislature. The executive. The executive means law enforcement or implementation. For example, the government, the bureaucracy, which many of your IAS aspirants must be aspiring for. The bureaucrats, the IAS, they're called the bureaucrats. And do you know who's the head of the union executive? It's the president. The president of India is always and will always be the head of the union executive. The third is the judiciary. The main function of judiciary is to educate the laws made by the legislature and to interpret the laws or to declare any such law null or void if it violates the provisions of the constitution. And Supreme Court is the custodian of the constitution. It is the guardian of the constitution. So Supreme Court can term any law as null and void if it is violating any provision of the constitution. Even high courts can do, but Supreme Court is the custodian of the constitution. Other functions of judiciary is to render justice in the country. Before coming to the history of the constitution, how it was made, who were the people who were into the making of the constitution, who were the key people, who were the wise men, I would like to go with the flow and start on with what are the main features of the constitution, from what are the sources of the constitution, from where have we borrowed it, is the content borrowed or not, is the concept borrowed, and what are the articles of the constitution, and let us discuss all that. Let us skip the making of the constitution, the constituent assembly on to the later part. We'll do it at the end, but right now let us study the sources of the Indian constitution. Now let us talk about the sources of constitution. When we talk about the sources of constitution, there are 9 major sources from which the concepts, not the content, the concepts of the constitution have been borrowed. Let me talk about the 9 major sources first. The first of them and the main is the Government of India Act 1935. There were three major provisions that were borrowed. One, the federal structure, the federal structure that that we talk about, like every state has its own high court, its judicial body, its executive, and same is with the union. Then B is the administrative setup, and C is the center-state relations. These were the three major provisions that were borrowed from Government of India Act 1935. The second source is Constitution of USA. Now the three major provisions again that were borrowed from the Constitution of USA. Remember, only the concept was borrowed, not the content. The first provision is fundamental rights. Let me tell you, the fundamental rights, only the concept has been borrowed. The content is very different, and our content is more elaborate than the Bills of Rights of USA. The second provision that has been borrowed from Constitution of USA is judicial review, and the third is concept of preamble. Now you must be wondering, what is judicial review? The judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court to declare any law made by the Parliament and state legislature as null or void if it violates the provisions of the Constitution. You might have, if you've read the Constitution or you have a basic idea about the history, constitutional upbringings, then you must be knowing that a lot of times Supreme Court quashes any law or any bill that goes against the Constitution, or it destroys the basic structure of the Constitution. The concept of preamble, again, only the concept has been taken, but it is very different from the preamble of US. You should know the Constitution. You should know that the preamble itself is the acknowledgement of Constitution. Let me speak out the preamble for you. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation, in a constituted assembly this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. This was the preamble, and I wish that every Indian citizen should know his preamble by heart. The second source is Constitution of Ireland. The two major provisions is Directive Principles of State Policy, short term DPSP. There is a whole part in the Constitution which is part 4 on DPSP, and the second provision is elected president. We'll be explaining that in coming lectures. The fourth source is Constitution of former USSR, and the main provision that has been adopted is fundamental duties, part 4A. The fifth provision is Constitution of Britain, and since British Constitution, they had quite a good parliamentary model and all that, so we borrowed the concept. So the parliament, I'll tell you the three provisions is: one is parliamentary model, two is cabinet system, third is writ jurisdiction. The parliament that we look at the concept has been borrowed from Britain. Two, the cabinet system, you must have heard that every prime minister has its own cabinet, so that's cabinet system, so that has been borrowed. Third is writ jurisdiction. Now writ jurisdiction, what is it? Writ is a judicial order issued by Supreme Court or High Court in order to protect the fundamental right. Special orders are issued in form of writs. Writs are judicial orders. So if any time there is a requirement to protect the fundamental rights, any writ can be ordered. The sixth major source of Constitution, the borrowed Constitution, is the Constitution of Canada, and the two provisions are residuary powers and privileges of MP and MLAs. Well, the residuary powers are basically subjects which are not covered under the state, union, or concurrent list. They all are, come under the residuary power. For example, cyber laws. So the cyber laws have not been covered in any of the list, so they come under the residuary power. And privileges MP and MLAs. Well, to all Indian listeners, I don't think so I need to tell what exactly are the privileges. We all must be very well aware of it. Being professional, I should be explaining it professionally. The concept of the MPs and MLAs, they cannot be arrested in any civil case during the parliament sessions of 40 days. And they have a high the freedom of speech is more than a normal citizen. That's very normal. We all must be knowing it's but of course situation. The seventh major source is Constitution of Australia. The two major provisions are the concurrent list and joint sitting of the parliament. So whenever you've heard of any joint sitting, so the concept has been borrowed from the Constitution of Australia. And the concurrent list, when both the state and unions have the power to make law, and in case there's a clash, then the parliament would make law. For example, in education sector, there have been a lot of clashes between the parliament, between the state and the center. So parliament makes laws. Then the eighth major source would be the Constitution of Germany, and the major provision is emergency provision, as we all know, and I don't think so I need to tell about it. The ninth major source is Constitution of South Africa, and it's a very, very, very important and vital provision, procedure for constitutional amendments. We have Article 368 for amending our constitution. As I had told you that DPSP has been borrowed from Ireland. Must be wondering what is DPSP. Basically, directive principles are set of principles which have to be implemented by state, and if in case they are not implemented, that it cannot be challenged in any code of law. For example, right to work. Now I have a right to work, but I cannot challenge it, and in the court I can't say that you have to give me work, and why am I jobless. We have schemes like Manrega, which at least 100 days of work has been given to the poorest, but it cannot be challenged in any code of law. So till now, whatever we have done, there are three major questions, or we can say that the three similar looking questions which would have a similar answer are: Indian Constitution is a borrowed constitution critically examined, or Indian Constitution is a patchwork of many constitutions, or Indian Constitution is a constitution sui generis examined. Sui generis over here means unique in itself. So Indian Constitution is a constitution unique in itself examined. I would dictate answer for a perfect dictation, which would cover all the topics, and would help you, because writing skill is very important in case you are an IAS aspirant. So let me dictate the answer. Some of the provisions of Indian Constitution have been taken from different constitutions of the world. For example, fundamental rights from USA, DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy from Ireland, fundamental duties from former USSR, parliamentary system from Britain, residuary power from Canada, etc. Therefore, many critics of Indian Constitution call it borrowed constitution or a patchwork of many constitutions. Such a criticism of Indian Constitution is in fact unfounded. Our constitution makers studied various constitutions of the world, and some of the concepts have been taken from the constitution, and the content is ours. So the contents that we have taken, it is to suit the India's unique diversity, multiculturalism, etc. In fact, our fundamental rights is or are much more elaborative than US Bill of Rights. Neither any sentence of a preamble tally with US preamble. Similarly is the case with the DPSP, fundamental duties, etc. If only on the basis of taking the concepts from other constitution, a constitution will be called or termed as a borrowed constitution, then almost every constitution of the world can be regarded as a borrowed constitution. There are several features of Indian constitution not founded in any constitution of the world. Special protection to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and other backward caste and other weaker sections of the society. A federation with a strong center, a quasi federal constitution, a special language policy, special status given to state like Kashmir, protection of minorities, right, anti-defection law, etc. makes a constitution sui generis, unique in itself. So this was just a brief and start of the constitution. In the next lecture we'll be going through the structure of Indian constitution. Thank you.